Welcome on to Get a Shift On, your podcast all about career change and career transition. This week I was super excited to welcome and chat to David Crawford from Drakewalls Marketing. David moved from Scotland down to here in the lovely southwest of the UK, but has started an amazing marketing agency from very humble beginnings, and he shares his story in this episode, as well as some great tips and tricks for anyone looking to start their own business. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your time. Please do like, share, subscribe, and tune in for the next few episodes as well. Have a great day. Hello to everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Get a Shift On, your podcast all about career change. This week, I'm really very pleased to welcome David Crawford from Drakewalls Marketing. David, good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for asking.
Good. What's exciting? What's going on?
Well, we've already spent the morning together, so we've already said good morning actually off camera. We had a business networking meeting this morning, which was a nice way to jolt start ourselves back into the working week after the long bank holiday weekend.
Yes, it's always a hard start first thing on a Tuesday morning after a lovely long weekend. I find it always a bit tricky, but it was light when I woke up at 5:15, so that is a bonus. Hey, thanks ever so much for joining me. Obviously, you run a marketing agency. I want to talk a bit about that, but first, tell us what we need to know about you and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So, as you can probably tell by the accent, I am a long way from home. Was brought up in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I left Edinburgh after working in my first job, which was a lifeguard, and I went on to be centre supervisor and centre manager in the council leisure facilities in Edinburgh. I decided to take a bit of a leap of faith. I was a musician at the time, and I joined a band in London. So I left Edinburgh at 21 to go and try and make my way as a musician down in London. Relatively successful, I would say. Throughout my 20s, we travelled around, we toured a bit, we recorded in some amazing studios, including Rockfield Studios in Wales, which has had every recognisable name right from the 70s through to present day, passed through the doors there. So that was a very unique experience. And when I was in the band, that's when I picked up my first kind of bit of experience within marketing. Obviously, we marketed ourselves before we were signed to a label. We had to do it all ourselves, from graphic design, sites, organizing events and promoting them. So that was a kind of starting point for me there. I then got a job working as marketing manager for the largest music stand manufacturer. That sounds glamorous, doesn't it? In the world. They've got some pretty cool clients, actually. They work with the Sydney Opera House, Royal Opera House, pretty much every recognisable theatre across the UK. You will find products from this company. Worked with them for a few years until I decided to follow my love of the water. I learned to surf when I lived in London, which is not really a great combination.
All those waves on the River Thames. Who knew?
All those waves. So I was traveling down to Bournemouth kind of like every second weekend to go and catch some waves, and I took a chance trip down to Cornwall and absolutely loved the southwest, and decided, after I think I was about coming up for 10 years in London at that point, which, if anybody is, particularly if you weren't brought up in London and then you've kind of moved there, the first few years was fantastic. But as I was getting closer to 30, I was thinking I'd like to settle down somewhere that's not going to cost me £750,000 to buy. So I moved to the Devon Cornwall border. And it was at that point that I started Drakewalls Marketing.
So clearly the first question is music. What kind of music? What kind of band? I'm intrigued.
Well, we were indie pop, I suppose. We were quite the kind of middle of the road indie venture, really. It wasn't anything too crazy, but we kind of played with people like Supergrass. We were on the same label as Charlie Simpson from Busted when he did all of his solo releases after he had left Busted and then before he went back again. So he was on our label as well. Yeah, we were kind of bass guitar, electric guitar, keyboard player, drummer. So we were a four-piece and lots of harmonies. And no, I am not going to give you a song right now because we're not going to subject the listeners to that.
That was also my next question. So I guess the next best question to that is, can we find you anywhere? Do you exist? Is there YouTube of this?
There's probably a few YouTube videos kicking around. Interestingly, the only place that we released our album in the end, this is going to be a long trip to go and listen to one of our songs, it was released in Japan, a limited release. I think it was something to do with our record label connection, had something going on out there. Years later, interestingly, I've probably got it lying around somewhere down there, but I bought this Japanese version of our album, so I've got a little copy of it sitting for keepsake, but no, we weren't huge. We weren't bringing in thousands and thousands of people, but it paid us a small wage for a number of years. And in terms of lifestyle, it was an incredible journey.
Experience. Wow, that sounds fantastic. And look, I look forward to seeing in person this Japanese record, and I'll try and hunt you out for everybody to listen to. Tell me a bit more then about how you managed to start that marketing journey with the band and then with the music stand manufacturer, which who knew? I guess, music stands obviously exist, so I guess they need selling.
They've got to be made and sold from somewhere, absolutely. So with the band, I wasn't making a hell of a lot of money, to be honest. It was lean times, that kind of compromise between what you want to do and what you need to do. So I started looking around for jobs that could kind of fit in and around the band. Obviously, most of our commitments were evenings, so I could effectively work during the day, which my parents used to remind me of a lot of the time. So I found a job that had the word music in it. That was how it happened. So I'm flicking through job adverts and I see this advert for a sales and marketing assistant for a music company. Did it even say music stand? I just saw the word music and thought, okay, it's not playing music, but it's in that world. So applied for the job, went along for the interview, and I had to really work on my pitch to them as to what I was going to bring to the party. Bearing in mind, I didn't go to university and study marketing. I had no real marketing background apart from the practical expertise which we were implementing in the band at the time. Like I mentioned earlier, we were setting up events, we were promoting events. That meant flyers back in those days. I'm a bit older than I probably look, so flyers were the thing to do back then. Email campaigns, record labels had this thing about you were only as good as big as your database was. So we'd been building up this email database for the years that we were in the band to like a few thousand people. So regular communication with them, which meant using the email software, designing emails. We had logos, we had single artwork, album artwork. That when you started to break it down, someone said to me when I was about to apply for the job, like you'd be a really good fit because actually you've got a lot of practical experience in all of the things that they're asking for in this job description. Okay, you've not got a formal qualification as such, but you have walked the walk and you've actually done it practically. So that was interesting. And I got the job, which at the time I was delighted about. My role within there grew quite substantially, quite quickly. Sales and marketing assistant at the start. I very quickly became marketing manager. And then I'd further down the line, I think I had one member of staff working underneath me at one point. But it was great. The company's global. I got to travel across the world. I used to go and do exhibitions in Germany, visit the United States. Yeah, it was really good and a really interesting learning point because obviously I'd gone in there with just practical experience, but I actually done a lot of learning in the job itself and kind of just trying to equip myself with the knowledge gaps that I had at the time. And working with different, because I was a market manager in a company, I was working with external agencies as well. So I was starting to learn about this marketing agency structure and how they go about things, and the way that they look at marketing either per campaign or on a kind of wider scale. So I found that whole experience really interesting. I worked for the company for I think it was about 7 years. And at that point, like I mentioned, I moved down to the southwest of England. Well, like where all good conversations start, I was down the pub one evening. It was a new town we had moved to, so I didn't really know anybody. Very friendly, very nice. People are obviously asking what you do. Work in marketing. I've worked for a company up in London, and at this point I was traveling back and forth between the two. So I was doing a couple of days a week up in London, a couple of days a week back down here. And as people got to know me down in this wonderful establishment on the River Tamar, I was asked, "Oh, could you do us a new logo for our business?" Yeah, no problem. I can do that. That little side hustle. That'll be great. And then, could you do us a website? Could you help us design some flyers? And all of a sudden, I was finding that actually my captive audience, considering everybody that drank in that pub seemed to be self-employed, that was my new networking tactic. It was getting to know the local town, the local community. And as you were working for people, you were starting to build this kind of reputation. Very small, sleepy town, so there wasn't any other marketing agencies, certainly close in the village. So I sat one day and said, "I think I'm going to go for this." I'd kind of built up to a certain point, a number of clients, no retainer clients on board at that point. It was all just ad hoc work that was coming in. So I remember I took a trip to Edinburgh to see my parents and sat at their dining room table one day and just said, "Right, what do you need to start a business?" So design myself a logo, design myself a business card, and put some feelers out for what I was going to do about a website. So I registered the domain that day. And then I had a chance conversation with a good friend of mine, Simon, who interestingly, that afternoon, we'd spoken a few times. Interestingly, Simon's brother was our sound engineer in the band, Russell. So I'd noticed on Facebook, he'd literally posted that day about building someone a website. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't know Simon was in marketing. I thought he was an engineer. So gave him a call and was like, just noticed that you've been building websites. He's like, yeah, I've got to get out of this job. I hate this job. And I'm thinking about going down that route. And I was like, well, interestingly, I'm sitting at my mum and dad's dining room table up here in Scotland with sketches of logos and plans to start a marketing company. Do you fancy doing a little bit together if we can get some opportunities? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So I phoned a contact of mine in New York who I'd done some business with in the music stand company and just said, look, I think I'm going to hand in my resignation at this job in London. Really enjoyed working with you, which I did. I had a lot of correspondence with them on probably a weekly basis. And said, really enjoyed working with you, and I'm going to start a marketing company. Please keep in touch. I'd love to get over to New York at some point and see you guys. If you're ever over here, you're more than welcome to come and visit me. And he said, whoa, you're starting a marketing company. He's like, well, we need a new website. When can you get started? And I've been working for that business since that day in the middle of March 2016 to Christmas last year. Unfortunately, due to ill health, it looks like the business is no longer going to survive. They're quite older, unfortunately. And the owner's been diagnosed with an illness that means he's not going to be able to work anymore. But yeah, nine years pretty much of working together. And also in that same week, a few days later, I done the old post out on Facebook and say, here I am, this is me, this is what I'm going to do. And a friend of mine from Edinburgh got back in touch and said, we were looking at employing a marketing manager. Just been reading your website, which I'd hastily put together in the days after. And it sounds like from what I read on there that's the sort of thing you can do. We could outsource our marketing to you. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I went back to see him a few weeks later. I flew up to Scotland for a meeting. And I'd agreed the first retainer contract at that point, kind of 2 weeks in, and thought, wow, this is going to be easy, isn't it? But it built really quickly. It was utilizing what I consider one of my better key skills, and that is me. I was asking people questions. I was putting it out there. I was making conversations, finding ways to make conversations happen. As well as I started to go around the local industrial estates in Tavistock and Launceston and Liscard, close to where I lived, and started to build up a bank of customers from there. So it was an interesting start. Almost fell into it there was a purpose kind of there, but it just all kind of happened naturally from that point, which was really interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And I think you've touched on several points there. One of it's about the power of sharing and talking. And unless you have those conversations, unless you put yourself out there, even if you're in the pub, it's amazing what kind of falls into your lap, as it were, once you start having those conversations and kind of putting it out there. And clearly that worked. And I presume you had business cards. You said you started them, put those out to the local estates.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, business cards were designed, and I just thought, what's the best way for me to start conversations? And it was put on a suit jacket, smarten yourself up. I even brushed my hair, which is and went out and just knocked on doors and spoke to people. And I was quite I was amazed because I kind of believed that was the right thing to do. But the amount of work that I got out of it was almost quite overwhelming right at the start, considering, I had a notepad, some business cards, and me and my laptop at that point, and that was it. And yeah, I interestingly just went back to see a customer last week, who we built a website for way back. They were one of the door knocks on one of those industrial estates, and we continue to manage their website, and we're just about to build a new website for them in the coming months. So we've still got some of those customers that we built up back then, which is lovely.
That's an amazing story, actually, to have the self-confidence to go out knocking on those doors and still have the customers is really exciting. How important do you think that self-belief is for you and for anybody looking to kind of start a business or indeed change a career, to kind of have that self-confidence to go out and do something different?
I think self-confidence is quite a big thing, and I feel like I'm qualified to say that, purely because I was an incredibly shy child right up until I was 16, 17, till I started working. And even then, it took me a little while to build up that confidence. I think that you need to have self-belief in whatever you do. I had self-belief in the fact that I went and left Edinburgh to go and join a band, because I believed it was going to happen. I believed that was the right thing to do. And I don't regret it, even though it's not my full-time job now. But I think you need to have a fire burning within you to achieve anything in life, whether that's sport, a business, a relationship even. I think having that burning desire in you to accomplish something is very, very important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you have to go with what feels good and feels right and have that confidence. Obviously, I'm sure when you were knocking on those doors, there was some rejection as well, I would imagine. Talk to me about that, share how that kind of feels and how you overcame that. Because clearly you did, because if you've still got customers now, people said yes. But tell me about those rejections.
Difficult to deal with at first. And I think even still, when I'm working on a project for a client, even now, we're doing, I mean, telemarketing is the most obvious one, that when you are literally just on that phone speaking to people. Don't do so much of it personally myself anymore, but I have done in the last previous months, kind of one or two campaigns. That is a difficult thing to handle, I think, for anybody to be told no. And to be told no and it be rude, I think, is the most difficult one to overcome. I think, if someone's genuinely not interested, but they're nice enough about it, then it's quite easy just to be like, no problem, shake hands. I'll leave a card for you anyway. If you change your mind, you know where I am. But yeah, you would get a small percentage, I would say, of people that you had just interrupted their day and made it feel like you'd perhaps trampled on their cat on the way in, which I didn't do, by the way.
Not on the way in,
But
maybe on the way
yeah,
out.
maybe the way out, yeah. But I think you are going to get rejection in life, and you need to have that. Your self-belief is the thing that gets you over that. And certainly it didn't stop me doing that particular route to market, because it was working. If you looked at the numbers and the percentages, if I walked an industrial estate for an hour, I knew I would walk away with a client. And that client's average sales value to me could have been anywhere between £200 to maybe a few £1,000, depending on the level of service and how long they were going to be with us. Take the example of the business from last week. They've been with us for 8 years now. So if you think about their average spend over that period for one door knock for one afternoon, it's definitely worth it, isn't it? Starting to think I should get back out and do it again.
I'll say, see you later, go and go trample some doors down. Yeah, that's great figures, isn't it? To have that. And I think, we always get rejection, but handling it and carrying
Absolutely.
on is good. You touched on as well something about not having any kind of formal qualifications, but that practical experience. How important, especially in a creative industry, do you think that is? And do you think there's too much reliance maybe on degrees and all these courses that you can go on, approving bodies, etc., etc., over just having some practical experience, which you clearly had with the band?
I think it's incredibly important to not get too bogged down in the fact that you have to have a qualification for something. Of course, there's qualifications out there that are absolutely a necessary requirement for a business. If you're doing a specialized skill and you need to have that qualification to do that job, then absolutely. But creative wise, no, I don't think it is so important. Of course, there are courses out there that you can go and do right up to university and degree level. But actually having practical experience and being good at what you do is really important. And I think that when you have managed to gain that knowledge through practical experience, it's almost a bit like driving a car, isn't it? So like you go and you do the test and you get out there, and the very first time you go out on that road, it's like learning to drive all over again, isn't it? And I see it like that a little bit, to be honest, because I think that you can take a qualification, but actually trying to apply it practically in a live role, if you like, that's a different ball game. And it has taken me a number of years to hone the way that we do things within our business here at Drakewalls Marketing without having all of that experience. It's not a qualification that's helped me hone my business and the way that we do and the results that we get for our customers. It's the experience of working even right back in the band days. I can relate myself to different industries, to different people. And there's no real substitute for that, is there? I think that you could go and get a qualification and pass an exam and you've got a bit of paper, which is great. But if you've been out and you've done it and you've got the results to show people, look, this is what we've done in 9 years worth of business. I think that personally, way
The results speak for themselves. When you've got
I'd
repeat
like to.
customers, when you've got good feedback, when your customers are getting the hits that they want on the marketing you're doing, then that, I'm sure, is very good for you and must make you feel very confident about your abilities.
Absolutely. And I think that there are people out there that have got that feeling that they're not quite good enough, or they maybe don't have enough of the skills. But that feedback, when you get that from a customer, that's why I get out of bed every morning. We've been really lucky in the last couple of weeks. We've had a flurry of some really good feedback of the jobs I've been working on for the past 4 to 6 weeks. And it's just, it makes you sit back, and I appreciate the customers that do work with us, and I also appreciate the team of people that I've got here working for me. So there's 3 of us in the Drakewalls marketing team, and it's nice to receive feedback that they've done a good job as well, because that just gives me more confidence. It just helps everything build, and it's quite addictive.
Just makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess as well, over the last 8, 9, 10 years, marketing must have changed an awful lot and continues to do so with the evolution of technology, AI, etc. What's the biggest change, do you think? You talked about flyers earlier on. I've still sent out flyers. I know other businesses have as well. Are they dead? What's dead? What's up and coming? What's changed?
No, I wouldn't say they're dead. I've just put an order in for some flyers for a client this morning, because the technique that we're operating this campaign on is almost a bit on purpose old school. We want to be making telephone calls. We want to be sending out a written letter with a wet signed signature and a flyer with it, because we deem that is the best way for us to communicate with our target audience within that business. They're not an easy one to get a hold of in any other way. They've got a role that kind of sits in the background. So it can be quite difficult to push your way past the gatekeepers to actually have a conversation with these people, which is always a challenge within marketing. But things have gone more digital in general. I mean, generalizing a little bit when I say that. I mean, email marketing was still around back then. It still is around now. It's noisier now. It's more difficult to make an impact than it ever was within email marketing. The rise of particularly search engine optimization is another kind of big one for people. The internet is definitely not going anywhere. I'm sure everyone would agree. So performing well on search platforms, Google being probably the most well known of them all, but other browsers are available.
I think I've heard of it.
So yeah, that's makes up quite a lot of the work that we do at the moment. Is that kind of, I guess you could classify it all as digital marketing rather than the kind of traditional marketing like flyers. But no, I wouldn't say that it's gone away. I think that the thing that I always try and do for any client is to try and build up that full picture and see where you can get different disciplines of marketing working in conjunction with one another so that you are touching in an appropriate way, and in inverted commas, your potential audience more than once. That's the big thing. The old rule of sevens, which was a theory that I think was first coined in the 90s, I believe, in the film industry. Kind of still relevant now. The number 7 was always a little bit of a kind of rough ballpark, but the theory behind it of actually having to make contact with somebody more than once before they make a purchase, that's never really gone away. So if you can be creative in what those 7 touches are, that's where the fun starts to come in, because then you can start to analyze the results and see what works, and what might work for one business doesn't necessarily work for another. And I always find that really interesting as well, which is why we put a lot of effort into strategizing for any customer that we work for, because we want to make sure that we get it right just before we jump in and spend £5,000 on Google AdWords, which goes nowhere, because that's how you ruin your reputation in marketing. Although a lot of companies out there certainly do recommend things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I have no doubt. I want to come back to that strategy in a minute, but I just wanted to explore a bit more. You talked about old school marketing. I think that's really interesting, because I think in a world where everything is so digital and you see kind of the replication of everybody who ultimately wants to sell. I look through Facebook, even LinkedIn actually, and it's just a constant, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. I think old school is really, really important for people just to have something different. What's the kind of most outlandish, not necessarily old school, but outlandish marketing campaign that you've done for someone?
Good question. We have a client over in Cornwall, and she runs a bridal shop. She sells wedding dresses. And last summer, she was thinking about different ideas to try and do something a bit crazy, a bit wacky. They are both a bit crazy and a bit wacky, which certainly helps. So they basically dressed up as brides and walked around Liscard, and they had branding with them, and they were going into shops and they were trying things, but they were tagging all the businesses as they were going into these places, and they were taking photos and they were documenting it on Facebook. And they got a little bit of traction from that locally. And that's what they were trying to achieve. They're a local-based business. Their clientele are all within a certain radius. So to go into a town centre and make a splash like that, I thought was quite an interesting one to do. And yeah, very, very, very fun to watch that all unfold on social media.
I guess there are so many pillars of marketing: social media, email, handwritten letters, wet signatures you talked about, which I love. Is there one that's more important than others, or does it just depend on the people, on the company, and what you're trying to sell and the focus market?
I think there's a lot of variable factors in there. And the first question that I would ever ask anybody before they write a sales and marketing plan, question number 1 is, what are you looking to achieve? / what does success look like? Because what might be a successful outcome to you might not be a successful outcome to me, or to person X. If that person's intention is they want to spend more time down the beach surfing, and they want to do things in a certain way to allow them that lifestyle of business, then that probably looks different to me that has got this target driven goal and we have to hit X amount every month, and those two things are completely different. Sector by sector, it can be different as well, but I really don't believe in a one size fits all. I think you have to sit down and analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the business, what the sector operates like in terms of marketing, and ultimately it really comes down to what does that person want to achieve. And I get really interested every time I sit and ask somebody that question, because I don't think I've been given the same answer twice.
And do you
And
think it's
it does.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, when I first kind of coined the question, I thought a lot of it was going to be focused on finances. I thought a lot of people would come back and go, we have to hit X every month. And when you start to understand the business and understand the person, because there's a person behind every business, that's when you start to realize that it's not always financially driven, and therefore we have to make this work in a way that satisfies their requirements. And it's always different. That's the thing I love the most about my job, is that no day is the same, no client's the same. It's always interesting.
Definitely makes getting up a little easier when there is that varied nature of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
If someone's looking to start their own business, what tips around marketing would you give them? What kind of process and strategy do you think is really good for those looking to start a business? And conversely, what isn't? What do people spend kind of maybe too much time doing and not doing the right things?
Sure. Well, I think where I would normally start, if you're kind of right at that very first like idea stage, and you're thinking, well, what next? You've obviously got to think about your product, but I would start to look at potential business names. I'd be looking at domains, so your website address, and make sure that those are available first. I've seen a couple of instances in the last few years where somebody's jumped a little bit too far ahead. They've done the logo, they've bought a domain, and then they've realized that there's another business down the road with the same name. And I'm talking like literally down the road. Like, that's a bit unforgivable. You understand if they're like, if you're based in Devon and there's a business in Newcastle, you can understand. But there are tools out there. Company's House is good just to have a check through. Search online, make sure that your name is unique as possible. That's a great starting point. And secure those domains. They cost like £10 for the year. If you're serious about it, just go and buy the domains. If you lose £10 at the end of the year because you don't go away with it, then that's not exactly a huge amount of money. So that would be my first bit of advice, would be secure those. Then I would be starting to think about a sales and marketing plan. I would get at least draft one done as quickly as possible, because you're never going to get to the end of a sales and marketing plan in the first sitting. You'd be lucky if you do it at the end of the second sitting, because the reason why these documents exist are to make sure that you're asking yourself questions, particularly if you're creating this plan on your own. And you can create these plans on your own. Don't be fooled into paying thousands of pounds to a marketing agency to do it for you. We're talking about real basic level things. What are you looking to try and achieve? What product or service are you selling? What price points are they going to be sitting at? Where's your margins? Who's your target market? What do they look like? So pricing point, target market. Then you would probably want to look at your routes to market as well. So what fits your business and your products and service. So that's everything from websites, email marketing, telemarketing, search engine optimization, Google Ads, flyers, banners, sponsorship. There's so many of them out there. But just start to get an understanding as to what could potentially work for you at that point, and start to think about the costs involved in it at that point as well. How are you going to monitor your success? Are you going to try and hit certain targets each month for number of leads, a number of sales, or number of hits to websites? There's all sorts of monitoring measures you can put in. Once you get to that point, I think in draft one, you're probably going to be left with so many questions that it's probably a good point to stop at that point and get back to the start and then work your way through it again, and make sure that what you said in your head the first time is still relevant the second time that you go through it. And then there are some great tools online, free resources that you can search for, communities as well of people. I think back at the start of the conversation, a lot of it for me was just having those conversations with people, starting off with kind of your close circle, your spouse, sibling, your parents, your children, even depending on what age you are. Start to get some feedback from them as well. always good to have them on board. Doesn't mean they have to be, but always good to have them on board. And then start to kind of broaden that message out from there, because the feedback from people around you that care about you can be quite good. I can understand that some people might not be so supportive, but I think the majority of people are. So that's where I would start if you were to start from nothing.
I think that's as good a place as any to start. And yeah, seeking advice from and thoughts from family, friends, etc. is always valuable. I'd always caution against it, because sometimes they can project their fears and worries onto you. Oh God, why are you doing that? Can't leave that job, or you can't do this, or oh, why would you want to do that? So many other people doing that. But yeah, absolutely, get that feedback, and then you can work with it. Do you think it's easy for people to get bogged down in some of that detail and get stuck and not move forward?
Yes, absolutely. If we take my circumstance, for example, I think I probably got about halfway through writing myself a marketing plan before I realized that I needed to get out and speak to people. And that's where that kind of door knocking started from, to get around the industrial estates and get my name out there. What did I need for that? I needed a business card. Did I really need a website at that point? I mean, it was advantageous considering the sector that I'm working in. Probably didn't really need one. People were wanting to speak to the guy that had turned up at their door. They wanted to hear what I had to say rather than what I had online. And at that point, my pitch was very, very different. So I was leaning on the fact that I'd worked in-house as a market manager for this big global company. And here I am. I'm going to turn all your marketing around.
So after a slight technical hitch, Dave was mid-flow. So we're just going to kind of carry on. And I'm going to ask what may or may not be a related question to where we were. But Dave, can you explain to us then some not to do's? I think we've talked about, starting, the positives, what to do. Don't want to be too negative, but there is a reality around starting a business, starting a campaign. What should we not be doing?
I think blowing too much budget too quickly is something which a lot of people do. It's great if you're sitting there with a kind of pot to start off with. It allows you to invest in your business, which is the right thing to do, but investing in the right things, not trying to find the silver bullet, which I can assure everyone 0.9% of the time does not exist. There might be routes to market that work better for businesses. Like I said earlier, what might work for one business might not work for another. But I come across people all the time that are going, I definitely do not want to do Google ads because we've done it once and it doesn't work. And you go, okay, so why, take me through it, why didn't that work? And you start to discover that they've basically thrown an ad up there, they've spent a couple of £1,000, their landing page is not relevant to the ad that they're putting out, the conversion rate's terrible, they've not set up their ads correctly, effectively just wasting money. And rather than look at what's caused it, they've now just got this thing in their head that does not work. And I see that across a few different disciplines. It's one of the reasons why we like to be able to offer a full service of marketing services, because we can then control the way that they work in conjunction with each other. And that's the way to think about it, rather than just make the mistake of going, I'm going to put all my eggs in that basket. It's just been Easter, so it's relevant to talk about baskets. Have a few baskets, fill them up.
I often see on Google, it says things like, we'll give you £400 free when you spend £400 of your own money on Google ads. Is it worth taking up offers like that? Is that something that I should come to you for? Could I do it myself? And what's your recommendation around those sort of?
Yeah, if you can get some free ad budget from Google, then that is obviously a good thing. If Google marketing is part of your strategy, I mean, I don't want to get bogged down with too much data. Google adverts are good and they work for certain businesses in certain circumstances. There's absolutely no denying it. They do have lower click-through rates. Really, if you're going to be investing a large amount of money and you're looking at it over a longer period, there are better things to do. But if you've got, I mean, there's businesses we run campaigns for all the time. I tend to use them more for kind of seasonal offers, or for an event that's coming up. So it's got kind of an end point, because it's very difficult to rank a website that quickly if you've only got a 3-month lead time between now and the event happening. By the time you've done all the work to get the website as high visibility as possible, the event's probably happened. So Google Ads can be really useful for that. It can be also really useful to start to build up your domain authority within the Google platform itself. So if you are starting off and you do have a small budget there and you see one of those adverts, don't just jump in and do it and get the advert out there, but at least click through it and get the code and make sure that you've got that credit allocated to your account. A lot of the Google softwares are really good to kind of start up. Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Google Ads, Google Tag Manager. Those are the kind of big four that I normally work with for clients, and setting them up is really easy. It's great to do all of that at the start rather than halfway through, because you've got all the data there and it's been capturing it from day one.
Do you out of business?
Thank you.
It'd be great for people to come to you. But let's say you are starting something, you have zero budget. Is it possible to get going and get those first customers without spending anything, or at least a very kind of minimal amount?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at my spend right at the start, it was some business cards, which I think cost me 20 or 30 quid. I did have the website, which I bought the domain for, but I didn't need it. That wasn't a necessity right then and there. So I started Drakewalls Marketing on £20. So yes, you can. You're probably going to have to fill those gaps where you don't have those items in place, probably with yourself. And I think depending on the sector, the industry that you're working in, that is perfectly achievable, particularly if you perhaps already have connections within that industry. So my own experience, I was working in marketing in music. When I left there, I had a database of people, particularly through my LinkedIn profile, that were all actually really relevant for my next step. That's going to set me in good stead going forward in the years after that. So yeah, look at what you've got already in terms of your assets. Your database is probably bigger than what you think. And that goes for personal contacts as well. My biggest retainer at the start, the business in Edinburgh that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, that was somebody that I'd met at a wedding of one of my best friends. So it wasn't a professional connection. He was just somebody that I knew that happened to have a business. So yeah, it can happen.
That brings us very nicely, I guess, kind of full circle then to having those conversations again, getting out there, telling people what you're doing, sharing, and whether it's in the pub, at a wedding, having those conversations and sharing how you can help people and the problem that you will solve, which I think is probably the key to it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts? Tell us a little bit about Drakewalls. Where can we find you? What services do you offer?
Certainly. Our website is drakewallsmarketing.com, and we offer a full range of marketing services, as I've mentioned. We love to work strategically first, so we offer sales and marketing strategies. We've just introduced a new package where a customer can take themselves through it. So you can either have me or one of my team for half a day, or you can take yourself through the plan. It's a much cheaper and affordable way of doing it. We're always at the end of an email or a telephone if anyone needs any help. But we also design, develop websites. We host websites. We maintain websites. We've got Simon that heads up our website development side of Drakewalls. We've also got Sophia that does all of our graphic design work. So we do flyers, business cards, logos, brochures, anything that includes graphic design, right through from design through to printing. We can handle that as well. We do social media training. We do social media management. We do email marketing training, email marketing management. We do blog writing. We do search engine optimization. Am I boring you yet? We're nearly at the end.
I can't keep up. I can't note all of that down quite so quickly.
Anything marketing we can look after, which is where we wanted to be right back at the start, where we couldn't. We're now at a point that we can offer a full service, but we're not a full service agency. We are 3 people that will be friendly, nice, and handhold you through the process. You're not going to get lost in the chain of when you end up dealing with agencies, because that was certainly my experience in London and I didn't like it.
Well, that sounds like a very helpful group of people to know and have contact with. I'll, of course, put links to anything that you want me to in the chat. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. And thanks for all you do. You've certainly helped us, and I love our conversations. And hopefully my marketing will get better and better as I work with you.
I'm only at the end of the phone, so give me a shout. Cheers.